I've tasked myself with watching a movie every day in 2025, and I thought it might be fun once a week to take a look back at a classic film on a big anniversary that I have never seen before. Well, this is the 40th anniversary of Desperately Seeking Susan. Let's take a deep dive. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my movie review and a closer look at the film Desperately Seeking Susan. This is celebrating its 40th anniversary. It was released April 12th, 1985, and this is one of the few Madonna films I had not seen. I'm a huge Madonna fan. I've seen her in concert 3 times. This is a shirt that I have from, it's a more recent shirt, but it's from this sort of era of Madonna's career. A few years after Desperately Seeking Susan came out. I think this is probably from the Cherish music video, which would have been 1990, but there may be 89. But anyway, this movie, Desperately Seeking Susan, is out now on Blu-ray by the fine folks at Kino Lorber. They really do some really nice packages, and this is the only, I think, Blu-ray release for this movie, but it includes an audio commentary from the producers and the alternate ending to the film as well, which we won't get into, sort of the spoiler territory here, because I want you to go watch this movie for yourself. But if you don't want to plunk down the money for the Blu-ray here, I'm sure you can rent it for a few bucks, on Amazon Prime or something like that. But if you are a subscriber for Dan Reviews It already, then you probably know that I mostly do newer movie and TV content here on the channel, reviews of movies and TV shows within the last year or two. But I thought with this big 2025 watch a movie a day project that I'm doing, it might be fun to take a look back at some of these classics and really kind of take some deep dives into them. I've done a handful of them already. There is a playlist on my homepage for them as well, but we've done recently Pretty Woman. We had Higher Learning, a classic from the mid-90s. I did Blood Simple, the first Coen Brothers movie, so a lot there to check out on the channel. But do subscribe if you are not one of my subscribers. Would love to have you aboard in that capacity as well. So let's talk about this movie again, one that I had never seen until very recently. So this came out, like I said, April 12th, 1985. It had a budget of $5 million and ended up grossing $27 million, and almost all of that was in the U.S. It wasn't really released in too many other countries at the time until, sort of the home video market. But it was good enough for the 31st highest grossing movie of the year. To that point, it was the highest grossing Orion Pictures film in Europe. And Orion had done Caddyshack, First Blood, Amadeus, and The Terminator. So for this one to outgross all of those movies in the UK is pretty impressive. And in 2023, the Library of Congress selected this for preservation in the National Film Registry. They do, I think it's 25 movies a year or something like that. And it's not always movies. Sometimes it's, a TV show or a commercial or whatever. But they decided a couple of years ago that this was significant enough to be in their registry. So that's fun. Rolling Stone ranked it in their top 100 movies of the 80s. And awards-wise, this won Rosanna Arquette a BAFTA, which is the British Academy Awards, for Best Supporting Actress. And she was also nominated for Best Actress at the Golden Globes. It's interesting because this movie, and we'll get into a little bit of the background of this, but it's a two-hander for sure, between Madonna and Rosanna Arquette. But as Madonna's fame grew, they sort of made the part bigger. And like I said, I'll talk about that. So it's interesting that Arquette won her BAFTA for supporting, but nominated for Golden Globe for Best Actress. So this is Madonna's first major film role. She did have a cameo in Vision Quest earlier in the year, which one of her big hits, I think it hit #1, Crazy for You, a great ballad from Madonna, was in that movie. So she sort of played like a nightclub singer or whatever. But she is, sort of the real supporting actress here, with Rosanna Arquette certainly having more screen time. But like I said, this became known as more of the Madonna movie, and Arquette went with it because it was, making the movie a success. So, even in the press and stuff, she was like, oh yeah, it's the Madonna movie. And not only is it Madonna's first big break in the movies, but this provided early roles for a number of other up-and-coming stars, including John Turturro, Giancarlo Esposito, Laurie Metcalf, and Stephen Wright. They all have appearances in this movie. And, Aidan Quinn, too. This isn't one of his first movies or anything, but one of his first major roles for sure. He plays the boyfriend here. So we go over to the casting couch. This is always fun to kind of look at who might have been in the movie, who auditioned, who turned down the part, what have you. So the chairman of Orion originally wanted Barbara Streisand to play Susan, which, look, Streisand was certainly a film talent at that point, as well as a huge music star, but she had done, Stars Born and Funny Girl, and she had a whole slew of movies that she had done, but I don't see her being right for the role of Susan at all after watching this. So, maybe it would have been a completely different movie. But the studio also wanted Ellen Barkin at the point, who very much wanted the role. But the filmmakers initially wanted Diane Keaton and Goldie Hawn to play Roberta and Susan, respectively. Roberta is the Rosanna Arquette character. Susan, of course, as I'm mentioning here, is played by Madonna. But the director wanted to cast newcomers Arquette and Madonna instead. The studio wanted the movie to have younger actors in order to appeal to younger filmgoers. So they were like, okay, maybe Barbara Streisand isn't quite, the right fit for her. So Susan Seidelman, who is the director of this, and this was her film debut as a director, she won out with those two ladies. But Bruce Willis was up for the role of Dez. He was certainly up and coming. This was even before Moonlighting, certainly before Die Hard. Kevin Costner and Dennis Quaid passed on reading for the role. They were offered a read, though. And some other Susan nominees, Melanie Griffith and Jennifer Jason Leigh, both auditioned for the role. And a very new singer-songwriter, Suzanne Vega. I mean, she had not hit it big yet. Her song Luca was a couple years away, and Tom's Diner even more years away. But that might have been interesting, having another, certainly not as known as Madonna at that time, but, Suzanne Vega, I don't know if I've ever seen her act in anything, so I'm not sure how that would have worked out. But moving on to some of the production notes of the film, Warner Brothers initially agreed to provide studio support for the film, but after funding the development of the script, ended up backing out and sort of put the film in turnaround. So Orion stepped up and said, no, we want to release that. And they invested more money into it, did some screenplay changes. So it incorporated more romance, more visual aesthetic, and rewrites and changes to the script were still being made when production began. Some of that was due, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and we'll talk about in a second, Madonna's sort of rising star at the time. We see the Statue of Liberty. This takes place in New York. It's a very, very sort of New York film. Statue of Liberty is seen in the movie when it was still covered in scaffolding during its 2-year renovation. So that definitely sort of dates the movie to a specific, time period. But this was inspired in part by this movie, Celine and Julie Go Boating. That's the English title from 1984, but I guess it's a French film. And it also has, like I mentioned, an alternate ending included in the DVD. We're not going to talk about, what that is here. But the director, Susan Seidelman, cut the scene, saying it was unnecessary, and audiences at the test screening thought the film was fine where it sort of ended originally. And I agree, after seeing it from the Blu-ray, I don't think that, extra ending or whatever was necessary. But we also had some scenes filmed at the Danceteria, which was a club that Madonna frequented, and it helped give her a start in the music business. So again, a very, New York specific thing, a very mid-'80s, early '80s, type of thing that Madonna really wanted to be a part of. But originally, like I mentioned, Arquette was supposed to have a bigger role, but was sidelined a little bit to give Madonna some more screen time. The movie was in pre-production at the time. Like I said, the screenplay was still being written, but she was on a rocket ride to success. Before this, before she got cast in this movie, she really only had her debut album, which had, a couple of hits, borderline, made the top 10, but Like a Virgin was, just an enormous album, and that was released while they were filming this. So, the songs like A Virgin and Material Girl and Dress You Up, were just climbing up the charts, making it a lot easier to say, oh, let's put Madonna in this a little bit more and give her, some more stuff. So the soundtrack itself, other than her big hit Into the Groove, which we'll talk about, but the score was composed by Thomas Newman, and was released on both vinyl and CD with another Seidelman film called Making Mr. Right, starring John Malkovich, that came out in, I think, 87. It's kind of weird. So in 85, when this movie came out, there was no soundtrack, but a couple of years later, when Seidelman had another movie, they put both of those on the same soundtrack. And I didn't know this about Thomas Newman. I've heard this name bandied about. He is a very prolific film composer. I don't know if he's still with us or not, but he was certainly very prolific at the time. And he is indeed related to Randy Newman. I think they're brothers. Randy Newman, of course, has done many, many soundtracks, a lot of the early Pixar stuff, for example. But yes, so Madonna recorded the song actually called Desperately Seeking Susan, but ended up not being used in the film. But she had this other song, Get Into the Groove, Into the Groove, that she was like, hey, maybe you guys want to work with this. So a demo version can be heard in the movie, but it was obviously, if you hear that song, you're like, man, that is a hit for sure. So they ended up, making that a music video and all of this. It was ineligible for the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart at the time, because at that point in time, you had to have a physical single release to be counted on the chart. So it did very well, with radio play. It was a #1 dance hit on the dance chart, but it was ineligible for the Hot 100. You could only find it on the B-side of her hit Angel, which, did okay on the charts, but Into the Groove was obviously much, much bigger on the radio. And she ended up putting it on a bunch of her greatest hits collections, and there was a re-release of the Like a Virgin album that included Into the Groove. It was obviously a huge hit, but it was #1 all over the world, in many, many countries, and it was her first #1 in the UK. All right, so let's get to the movie itself and what I thought of it. So the synopsis is basically, you have Roberta Glass, who is the Arquette character, this put upon, shy married woman in New Jersey, right kind of over the New York line there, fascinated by these messages that she sees in the newspaper between lovers Susan Thomas and Jim Dandy in the personals section of a New York City paper. She's particularly drawn to Jim's ad for Susan with the headline, Desperately Seeking Susan. It proposes a rendezvous in Battery Park. So Roberta goes to the park in hopes of catching a glimpse of, who these people are. She's sort of been living vicariously through these messages and these posts in the paper. And so she ends up, yes, seeing the couple, but she ends up also following Susan a little bit to a thrift store and through some events. Roberta ends up getting amnesia. When she comes to, she ends up essentially taking the identity of Susan, believing that she is Susan after buying a coat that she had just donated to the thrift store. Roberta goes in, buys the jacket, so it's Susan's jacket, and so because of that, she wakes up and ends up thinking she is Susan. There's a mob element here as well. The real Susan stole a pair of valuable Egyptian earrings, and so Roberta gets caught up in that with her amnesia as well. All right, so that's the synopsis. Let's talk about what I thought of the movie. So the plot, I would say, is probably the worst part of the movie, which, typically isn't a great sign, but it's a little all over the place, and clearly the whole amnesia thing, it's a pretty lame plot contrivance. It's very sitcom-y. We see this in a lot of old sitcoms, where a character gets amnesia, they don't know where they are, they don't know who they are, and so it sort of becomes a chain of interesting and comedic, silly events because of that. But amnesia, I don't think quite works this way in the real world. This was, proven many, many years after we had just been, no pun intended, but hit over the head with this amnesia plotline. It needs to sort of happen to move the story forward, but I do wonder, okay, could we have done something maybe with Roberta just wanting so badly to be Susan that, she convinces everybody else that she's Susan? I guess maybe it wouldn't quite work the same because you do have her husband, the Aidan Quinn character, who would obviously know who she was. So maybe she has to get some sort of amnesia for the plot to work. But, I found that a little bit lame. And it also doesn't follow along with its own rules. Sometimes the amnesia comes and goes for what Roberta remembers and what she doesn't. Again, very sitcom-y. We saw this a lot in the 60s and 70s. Gilligan's Island, somebody gets amnesia. It's like that's kind of the level that we're at here. So the plot, is not my favorite part of the movie at all. But there's a lot of good in this movie for sure. First of all, I think it very well captures the New York City scene, especially the club scene, especially in that time period, the mid 80s. Madonna obviously, fashioned a lot of Susan's character off of what she was all about at the time, the clothing, the scene, and this look. We'll show it again here from the cover, but this look of Madonna's here is very, very classic. Like when people think of, okay, a Madonna look in the 80s, if it's not specifically Material Girl, which was, parodying a Marilyn Monroe bit from 30 years earlier, this is what they think of. This New York club glam, whatever kind of look with, a lot of accessories, a lot of, neck material and bracelets and all of that kind of, and the white glove, like when Romeo and Michelle do their high school reunion in that great 90s movie, and they sort of want to emulate Madonna. This is how, they are dressed. So, this is a very iconic look from Madonna, and it's not just that, though, that goes into this character. Susan is obviously, Madonna wasn't on the run from the mob or whatever, but Susan is really embodied and I think informed by what Madonna wanted to exude at that time to the public. And I think this movie really, when I go down this list of other people, that might have been Susan, Barbara Streisand, definitely wouldn't work. Goldie Hawn, I don't think so. Goldie Hawn could have done it, but obviously they were going for a younger crowd, so all right. But even then, Melanie Griffith, Jennifer Jason Leigh, was Meg Ryan a part of this? Did I say that somewhere? I don't know. But in any event, no. I really think the movie would have been different if it were anybody but Madonna. And that's not to say at all that she's playing herself, but she is certainly throwing a lot of her aesthetic and her vibe into this character. And I think that's, maybe why a lot of her roles that do more embody the Madonna vibe work so well. Dick Tracy, A League of Their Own, just as a couple of examples. And I love the juxtaposition between the two characters. I might not love the plot conceit of the amnesia and, how it sort of plays out, but I really love sort of, Arquette being this just, stuck in a rut marriage. She wants to explore the world and she feels like she can't, so she's living vicariously through these ads, through these love notes in the paper. I love her juxtaposition with this super outgoing Susan, and who obviously has problems of her own, being chased by the mob and other things that Susan, or that Roberta rather couldn't have known about, from those articles. So I thought that was a really interesting juxtaposition between the two, and Madonna's performance. Like I mentioned, some of these other movies that she's been in, where she's playing a Madonna-esque character, or she's, the character has some shades of the real Madonna. Look, at this point in her career, she was certainly, riding high. It wasn't quite the peak yet, but she was just bursting onto the scene, and people just loved the Madonna that they saw in the music videos. And this really, I think, gave her acting credibility. It's not a role that requires a ton of heavy lifting. I can see why Arquette got some awards, accolades, but not Madonna. But it really does cement her as a solid acting, force. And I appreciate that about this movie. So look, overall, I would say by far the worst is the whole amnesia thing, which is a key plot point, and without it, the movie is something very different. So, a lot of this, a lot about this worked, that did not. But I will leave Desperately Seeking Susan with a B. Is it one of the top 100 movies of the 80s, like Rolling Stone said? I don't know if I could say that from an objective standpoint, but if I'm thinking about movies that embody the 80s and 80s culture, and, if you look at it, you say, okay, this is definitely set in the 80s. It was released in the 80s. This is kind of an artifact of the 80s. Yeah, I mean, that it makes the top, probably 50 for that. But in terms of just movies, I don't know, but very cool that the film registry has put it in there as a movie they want to preserve for future generations. I appreciate that. All right, so that will do it. My next few videos will certainly be more current, but we have some interesting older movie reviews coming up, including Basketball Diaries, an early Leo film, and a Goofy movie. I'd never seen that before, and I watched it recently, so we're going to talk about that coming up soon too. So thank you for watching Dan Reviews It. I will see you next time. Bye.